Hey everybody, I've got a couple movies for you today. The first one is going to be a documentary made in 2019. The second one is a feature film by a now pretty well established director, his first feature film, I think, from 2011. The two movies we're going to talk about today are Love Antosha, which is a documentary about the life of Anton Yelchin, the actor. And the second one is going to be Absentia, which is the first feature film by Mike Flanagan. Now, right out of the gate, Love Antosha. This is a 5-star documentary in my book. That's unusual, I think, to think that a bio documentary about an actor who maybe you only know of from Star Trek, the remake of Star Trek. Why would he have a 5-star documentary about him? I actually knew him from a couple other things too. I love him in movies like Green Room and some of those kind of things. He is a surprisingly interesting person with a surprisingly interesting life. And I think what makes this a great documentary is it shows you something about someone you had no clue about. Now, a lot of times with biodocumentaries, you're going to find out about some person in history that you may have never heard about, or some inventor or something else. It's not usually someone that is already pretty much famous. So a lot of people have heard of Anton Yelchin, or if they see him, they go, oh, I've seen that guy, whatever. So you assume there's not a whole lot there. But this documentary is amazing at showing not only the life of somebody who should have and could have been very impactful in the future on film, and secondly, about just the life of a family, of the love between parents and a son to the parents, and just how a loving family can nurture an artistic spirit. I think really that's kind of the big kind of core of this movie, and what really makes it have an impact above and beyond just a standard bio documentary. So I would say anyone who has any reservations going in, or think, I know about that guy, or I'm not really interested about that guy, I don't even think you need to care about his movies to have an emotional impact from this documentary. But if you do, or have a slight interest in him, it just is going to enrich it more and going to make it even more sad in a sense, and tragic that we lost him. What I was thinking about earlier was what I would compare it to is James Dean. James Dean, he's the icon. He's the guy that made those 4 awesome films, and he just got cut short, and he could have been amazing and whatever. But from everything I hear about James Dean, I don't get this level of interesting breadth of possibilities and potential from James Dean that I get from Anton Yelchin. Amazingly, you wouldn't think. So only other things I want to bring up is there's a couple things that make this also a good documentary. It isn't just talking heads. There are some talking head moments, but overall it's mostly footage from his life, from when he was a very, very, very small child. You have tons of footage that they shot themselves, that he shot himself. You've got, of course, on the set footage. You've got journals, which are read by Nicolas Cage, of all things, and is amazingly good. One of the better things Nicolas Cage has done in the last few years, and he's kind of having a up and down renaissance recently. But Nicolas Cage was with him in a movie. And that kind of brings me to the other point. Other than just it being a technically interesting documentary and from a variety of sources, so you don't have this talking head boredom, it also demonstrates that he impacted pretty much everybody he encountered. Now, that's kind of common, right? You get the eulogies, and everyone's like, oh, what a great guy he was and everything and all that kind of stuff. But here, it really feels there's meat on those bones. You really get a feeling that he did impact these people. And there's people on here that don't have to talk great things to the level they do about someone like Anton Yelchin. I mean, you get the people who were his co-stars. You get the Jennifer Lawrences and the people from the Star Trek movies and all that kind of stuff. That would be kind of expected and understood. But you also get people like Albert Finney and Martin Landau and Anthony Hopkins, and all of them are saying things just like the people you'd expect to be saying those things. And you get people like Martin Landau saying that they've lost someone really, really, really important. And that's kind of an interesting thing to get in a movie like this. On top of that, you get a lot of other things as far as, you get to see his photography and his music and just all kinds of stuff. I would say it's great from the aspect of the biopic, which you'd expect, or the bio documentary, but it's also great from just the aspect of just a well-rounded human life and just kind of seeing how that's playing out. I would highly recommend Love Antosha, which is his Russian version of Anton, on Amazon Prime, if you've got that. My second one is on Shudder currently, but you can also get it a lot of places. It's been out for a while. It's the first major feature by Mike Flanagan, and that is Absentia. This movie kind of is the beginning of some of the things that you see later on. A lot of people basically have caught on to Mike Flanagan and what he's all about now. I think for a lot of people, his movies seemed sort of mainstream and basic, and they didn't understand that there was this subtle intricacy to his horror movies that are above and beyond your average horror movie. He can take things that seem very like a mainstream version of horror, but he does them in a way that's very interesting and unusual and highly effective in a way that you wouldn't expect. People have pretty much caught on to that now. It took me a while to catch on to it too. I mean, I saw Oculus early on. It didn't quite catch my eye. But after seeing things like Gerald's Game and the Haunting of Hill House series, and of course recently he did Dr. Sleep, he's done quite a few things that have got people really going like, this guy is something special in the horror film community. He is and it's kind of ironic, he's done a bunch of Stephen King stuff because he is kind of the Stephen King of horror filmmakers. He's got a crowd-pleasing element to him, but he also has something else there that really is special. This is his first film, so it is very, very low budget. So it is what it is. But also on top of that, you can see the beginnings of what makes him great later on. So this isn't really his best movie, but for people who are into horror movies, or especially people who like Mike Flanagan, I would say go back and check it out. It's worth your time. It's got Catherine Parker in it as one of basically the main lead in this, who is part of his acting troupe. That's another thing about him. He's kind of built up an acting troupe the same way that you see with people like Tarantino, or you see with Woody Allen, or famously those kind of auteur directors, David Lynch, will have kind of repeating group of actors that'll kind of reappear in his movies. Well, Flanagan's doing the same thing in horror movies, which is not very common. And even in this first movie, you see one of the actors that appears in pretty much everything he does, and he's slowly been building that group up. The basic concept is pretty simple. You've got Catherine Parker's character is coming home. She's a sister. Her older sister is pregnant, living at home. She comes home back to her sister, and Catherine Parker's character has been kind of struggling addiction and stuff her whole life. So she's kind of returning home, and she's better now, And when she gets back there, it's been like 7 years that her older sister's husband has been missing. And then that slowly leads to a whole like supernatural element of other animals and people have gone missing in this area, and what does that all mean? And it's very low budget, so there's definitely some acting and some cinematography shortcomings there. But considering what he's got, you can definitely see the early ability of Flanagan to build up a tense scene and to find horror in very limited resources, and to do some actually fairly disturbing and messed up stuff by the end of this movie without having to go to some big effects or some big gore. He does a couple things that'll kind of mess you up a little bit if you stick with it in a surprising way. It's for horror fans, I would say definitely check it out, especially if you like Mike Flanagan stuff. It's worth a look. I would probably give this about a 3.5 star, just mostly because it isn't great, but it is definitely solid and good, and for its budget, it's quite good. And that is on Shudder. Absentia. All right, guys, so that's the 2 movies for today, and we will talk to you soon.